Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. Today we're talking about authenticity. And we're talking about authenticity in a little bit of a different way that I think is going to be really eye-opening, maybe expose some things that you haven't thought about before, maybe make you a little bit mad, maybe make you a little bit optimistic. So let's dive in. We're going to talk about authenticity as a trap for women leaders. And I'm excited to talk about this because I think that we get sold a bit of a fake bill of goods when it comes to authenticity for women in general and for women leaders. We're told that we should just be our authentic selves and to practice being authentic in different ways and find your authentic voice. So authenticity is something that comes up a lot in leadership trainings, when we're talking about executive presence, when we're talking about how we should show up in the world, interact in the world, engage with the world. But the truth is that sometimes authenticity can be really, really confusing because women aren't necessarily conditioned to be their true self. We're conditioned to be people who are helpers and caregivers. We're conditioned to be people who are quiet and docile, even if that's not our natural self. We're conditioned to, if we're going to go for leadership, we need to be more loud, more extroverted. So we're constantly being told ways that we should show up and behave and interact and engage with the world that may or may not really resonate with who we really truly are authentically. And it is very possible to get to middle age and not really know who you authentically are. And so this is something that's come up in one-on-one coaching for me and in group coaching environments for years, for decades, actually, if I'm thinking back. But I also have had this come up recently in a couple different settings where I thought, I want to talk about this on the show. So one of the first examples that I can think of around this conversation where this really jumped out at me was I was talking with a new coaching client early on when I was working as a coach, and she was telling me about having a hard time knowing what foods she liked and knowing what colors she liked. So giving a little bit of context, she had grown children. She had two sons. They were like 20 and 22. They were both in the process of moving out of the house. So I think they had both graduated from college and they were moving on. And we were talking about some stuff going on with her personally and professionally. And she said, one of the things I'm noticing is my whole life for the last 22 years, I've been making dinner for my kids based on what they wanted. And before that, it was making dinner for my husband based on what he wanted. And she's like, honestly, now I'm in this position where I can just make whatever I want for dinner. And I don't know what food I like because I've just made the food that other people like for so long. And then she was talking about like going and painting her son's rooms. And so she was like, okay, the boys are gone. Like I want to paint their rooms and redecorate them. And she literally thought, what colors do I like? Because I've been picking colors for my house and making decisions based on what everyone in my family would want. For 22 years, I haven't thought about, well, what do I want? And this conversation happened, I believe maybe Vinny, my now 13-year-old, was just a baby when we had this conversation. And I remember thinking that it resonated then, but man, I can tell you 13 years later, it really resonates now. In fact, I was just laughing with another mom about taking myself shopping to get clothes for myself. And it was like so weird and freeing to make decisions for like, I'm just going to buy clothes that I like instead of hemming and hawing over like, oh, will he wear this? Will it fit? Is it going to be too loose or too baggy? Is he going to complain? Am I going to buy it? And then I'll never wear it? Like all these different things. So if we're in this position of having been conditioned to take care of others, we often don't even realize how much we've lost our own sense of what do we really like? What do we really want? What are our preferences? So that's one aspect of this. But another aspect can come in when we're looking in professional environments and we're being told to show up authentically and we're being told to put our own, have our own brand around leadership or our own build our own personal and professional, or build our own personal leadership brand in the workplace. And this is something that I am constantly helping my clients with. This is a lot of what I do in one-on-one coaching is helping my clients build out their personal leadership brands. It's really fun and really exciting work. When I'm having conversations in groups of women especially, and this conversation comes up, the thing that I notice is that we talk a lot about authenticity, but we don't define it. There's no common language for what it really means. It's just something that we're encouraged to embrace and we're encouraged to practice. But what does it really look like? And so I was recently in an event where there was a roundtable discussion with a group of women over lunch, and we were talking about showing up authentically. And I said, I think one of the challenges is that for a lot of women, they don't know who they are authentically because they've built their career on showing up in a certain way to get what they needed or wanted. And that maybe wasn't their most authentic self. It was doing what they needed to do to get the promotion or be seen in a certain way or be, deemed credible in their industry. But it wasn't necessarily them being their most authentic self. In many cases, it was them rejecting their authentic self because they knew that's what would actually get them what they needed. And so this is where it becomes really tricky. So as we're digging into this, I think we have to look at socialization. We have to look at what modeling has looked like across our careers and in our current professional world. We have to look at stereotypes and norms, and we have to look at when we show up authentically, what does that really feel like? And are we creating space for ourselves to continually learn as we grow who we really are in any given season? Because me showing up authentically when I was 22 is going to be really different than me showing up authentically now, turning 50 the week that this episode goes live. And so our authenticity also is like constantly in evolution. And so how are we taking the space and making the space to make sure that we're tuned in to what that means for us? So let's just talk a little bit about what authenticity, what it is, what it looks like, and why it can be really difficult. So a few reasons that authenticity can be difficult to come by for women and for women leaders. So whether you're a leader in a corporate workplace or a leader out in your community or you're running your own business, why might this be difficult? So first of all, we're conditioned to form within certain gender stereotypes. We're conditioned to fulfill role congruency or congruity. So we are told that we should look and act a certain way, that we should show up in a certain way and in all these different environments in our lives. And so we just practice doing that without thinking about it. And especially early on in our careers, we just want to be successful. We want to get ahead. We want to fit in. And if we're in places where there's not a lot of people that look like us, we're just trying to look like and act like what most of the people are looking like and acting like so that we can get where we need to go, right? We don't want to face backlash. We don't want to be deemed unlikable or hard to work with or anything like that. So we're just trying to fit in and figure it out early on. And that can become our norm. And sometimes it takes us years, if not decades, to challenge the status quo to break out of that and to really understand, oh, wait, that isn't necessarily me being me. That's me being who I thought I should be. The second part of this is that authenticity can be really difficult because we are receiving constant input. So we're receiving input in our professional lives, in our work world, in terms of how we're told we should be showing up. We're receiving input on social media. We're receiving input through the news. We're receiving input through all sorts of channels all day long, unconsciously, that fills us up with shoulds. And so when we're filled up with these shoulds, we are constantly internalizing messaging in all these different capacities in our lives around how we should be behaving, showing up, speaking, acting, dressing, looking, all the things. This constant input, it's like a flood. And to be able to push back against that flood takes a ton of intentionality and some mental space and some mental strength. And so you have to be really conscientious to be like, hold on, I don't need constant input. And then how am I going to act accordingly? How am I going to put up some walls, barriers, and boundaries so that I actually have some space where I'm not getting constant input? So we'll talk about that more in a minute, but this part is really important. If we're getting constant input, the input that we're taking in often overrides what we internally feel or know. And we can really lose sight of what we internally feel or know because the constant inputs can be louder, more frequent, and take up more space and become just like so high in volume that the stuff on the inside, we don't hear it anymore. We're not connected to what we see, feel, and hear internally. And so we're just listening to all of the external input. It can also be extremely difficult for women to show up authentically because of underrepresentation of women in the spaces where we often want to be. So this is partly us thinking, well, I guess I need to be like the men who inhabit these spaces because then maybe I can fit in well enough to get what they have in terms of roles and promotions and pay, et cetera. But the other piece of this is that when there's so few women ahead of us, that we feel like, well, I have to be like one of these few women. I can't be my own brand of myself. It either needs to look like, role model A or role model B. Like if I only have a couple women ahead of me or very few women role models who are working a level or two above me, I think those are like the only brands of authentic women leadership that there is. And I feel like I have to then become one of those. So because we don't have a ton of representation of women in higher roles, then the spectrum for what we see as acceptable or normal or typical or common is much, much narrower, and with a narrow range of what we think is acceptable and is rewarded and is normal or typical, then that doesn't give us a lot of bandwidth or a lot of space to push those boundaries and be who we really might be if they maybe, push the spectrum a little bit more to the right or to the left. We're thinking that we have to just live within this small window of boundaries that were already created by the limited people who are ahead of us. The other reason it's really hard for women to show up authentically is because by nature, we have been conditioned to caretake and people please. And caretake and people please is something that we're taught really early on when we are taught to center other people's needs and desires above our own. So from a really young age, we're taught to wear the dress that grandma gave you at Christmas because it'll make her really happy. We're taught to go sit on Uncle Larry's lap, even though he's kind of creepy to us, or he laughs too loud, or he puts his hand on our leg and we don't really like it. But we're taught to that's Uncle Larry loves you. Go sit on his lap, make him happy. So we're taught to override our own instincts and people please from a really, really young age. We're also taught to caretake from a young age. And so we're taught to take care of others. We're taught to look out for hey, did you see if anyone else needed anything here? And we're taught from a very young age to be doing that in all sorts of settings. And so when we're always people pleasing and caretaking and centering other people's needs, what we're then doing is self-abandoning and we're self-sacrificing, and we are rewarded for this. Women are rewarded for being self-sacrificial. We are rewarded for acting against our inner knowing and acting against, we're rewarded for acting against our inner knowing, and we are rewarded for doing things the same versus doing things differently. So when our internal knowing says, maybe you should try it a different way, we get that can be scary. It can feel too risky. So we don't do that. So even when our internal knowing says we shouldn't push back or we should, stand up and speak out, that can feel really risky. So we continue to self-abandon instead. We are also moving so quickly and competitively through life that it can feel impossible to pause and be hold on, wait a minute. Who am I really authentically? So I can relate to this so much that if I want to find my internal voice and connect with that voice and really listen deeply, that takes time. That takes time I often don't have in my day. That takes white space. That means that it takes space where I don't have input coming in. I don't have anyone in my household needing anything. I don't have anyone in my workplace needing anything. I don't have my dog needing anything. So when we're moving so quickly and competitively through life, trying to get to the next thing, trying to add the next thing to our resume or get the next, hit the next achievement, even if it's just being competitive with ourselves, then we're not pausing to get quiet enough to listen internally. And over the time, that means that we, again, are denying that internal knowing and shutting it down and listening to those inputs that are constantly coming in instead. And then the last reason that we might struggle to show up with authenticity is because we've been penalized for doing it in the past. And so if we have been penalized for showing up authentically, maybe there was a time when we spoke up about something and there was a consequence for it. And so we were okay, never doing that again. Maybe there was a time where, you wore a certain thing to the office or into a community event or even to a family event for that matter. And someone said something and you were I can't do that. I can't be that version of myself. That felt like the real me, but that did not fly in that room. So I'm not doing that again. So there's penalties, right? There's penalties in professions. There's penalties in who gets promotions. There's penalty in rates of pay. So it often pays off to fit in, even if that means rejecting really who we authentically are. So we have then enormous costs of not being able to honor this authenticity. So let's talk about the costs, and then we're going to get into like, how can we actually be more authentic in a real way? So these costs show up in burnout and exhaustion. We're tired. We're trying to be people that we're not. We're trying to fit into who other people expect us to be. I've had so many of my coaching clients show up and just say, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm a shell of myself because I'm just trying to like perform for everyone else all the time. It's so exhausting. We erode our own self-trust. So one of my most popular keynotes is all about how our own self-trust is eroded inside of us from a very young age through very specific developmental phases. When we are told that we need to act a certain way and we're rewarded for acting in a way that is self-sacrificial, then we consistently are undermining or eroding our own self-trust. And what that means over time is that we listen less and less to our inner knowing and more to that external input, and continue to prioritize what that input is telling us versus what we are telling ourselves inside. So we end up with identity confusion. We're like, I don't even know who I am. I'm so used to being what other people want, I don't even know. This shows up all the time. So this is my client who didn't know what she wanted for dinner, didn't know what room to paint, what color she wanted to paint her rooms in her house, that I don't even know who I am because I've been so busy being supportive to other people and being who they needed, that like, who does that mean I am? What does that mean for me? And we have decreased fulfillment as a result of all this. So again, that kind of feeling like I feel like I'm just a shell of myself because I'm just like dancing for other people all the time. We have relational costs. And so when we are not being authentic, we don't build trust in the same way, and we don't build connection in the same way. We've probably all had situations where you have an interaction with someone and you're just like, oh my gosh, I felt like we knew each other forever. Or like, I just felt like we were on the same wavelength. There was a vibe between us that was undeniable, some sort of immediate connection. That's when you know, like, I'm being authentic and they're being authentic and we can feel it. When that's not there, relationships don't form as easily, or relationships can be very quick. They can be established quickly and destroyed quickly. And so those inauthentic relationships, we can establish surface level relationships really quickly and in high volume, but we can also lose them really quickly and in high volume when there's not an authentic connection, when we're not showing up as our true selves. Then we also have missed opportunities. And so when we aren't being our authentic selves, we're being this other version of ourselves, and people see that and they sense that like, this person isn't quite who they could be. There's missed opportunities. We're passed up. Authenticity invites openness and vulnerability. And when we can be open and vulnerable, then we can form those connections where people can really see us and we can really share ideas and we can take risks around one another. And that all advances relationships. But when we can't do that, then we're not advancing relationships and we're going to be overlooked. We're not going to get as much as we otherwise could have gotten out of those relationships. And then there's organizational and community costs. And so when we are not being our authentic selves, the organizational or community cost, or even within our family household, the cost is that the world doesn't get the best parts of us, and that the world doesn't get our creativity and what makes us unique and our secret sauce. And when we aren't sharing our secret sauce, the world doesn't benefit from us doing the things that only we can do a certain way. And when we are trying to be a cookie cutter version of who we think we should be or who other people think we should be, we're being a percentage of ourselves. And it's that percentage that's missing that shifts the needle, that has great impact, that allows the world to benefit from who we truly are in a much more significant, impactful, and substantial way. With this, then, comes us being unhappy. It's low sense of self. It's low morale. It's low motivation. Well, that's also not going to be motivating to the people around us, right? They're not going to be attracted to us if we're just walking around a shell of ourselves. They're going to feel that. And so we're going to potentially breed that if we are leaders, breed that within our own culture. And we're ultimately perpetuating and upholding inequity. If I can't show up as my true self, then I'm giving to the system and upholding the system that is built to benefit others and not people like me. Now, I want to be really clear. sometimes the risks of showing up as my true self might be not safe. It might be too dangerous. And while we're contributing to that inequity, that's the only way for us to exist in that system safely. But if we can show up with more authenticity, if we can show up as who we truly are, and we can blaze that trail for ourselves, then we are broadening that range of what does it look like for a woman leader to show up and lead and speak up and stand out. So earlier I talked about, like, if there's only a couple women above you and you only have like, okay, I can be like that person or like that person, because that seems to be what's acceptable here. That's a pretty narrow range. But if you can be the person that widens that range of what it looks like to be a woman leader, what it looks like to be someone with a voice and an opinion around here, what it looks like to be someone who, isn't afraid to speak up, who isn't afraid to advocate for change, who isn't afraid to self-advocate, then we get to widen that spectrum. We get to widen that range of what it looks like for a woman to take up space here. And that's how we can start to upend the systems that were only built to benefit certain people or people that look a certain way. So now, how can we do this? How do we go about practicing finding that authenticity and practicing showing up in more authentic ways? So first is always to start small. If you listen to this and you're like, great, tomorrow I'm going to show up as a totally different version of myself, it's going to be really weird and awkward. So if you want to be more authentic, you want to try things in small doses in places where it's safe to do so. So this might be like, I'm going to wear a different kind of an outfit. It might be, I'm going to do my hair in a different way. Now, those are very superficial examples, but sometimes it's just those little things that's like, no, like this is really me. It might be, I'm going to practice setting a boundary in this meeting. I'm going to ask a different kind of a question. I'm going to share an idea that might be like way out of left field and just see what happens. So we're doing little micro experiments where we're showing up in a different way and noticing what happens. I had a client a while ago who was like, none of my coworkers know that I'm funny because I'm just always so buttoned up trying to do things exactly right because I want to show everyone that I'm serious about my work because I really want to get this next promotion when I'm up for it. And she'd been working on this for years. And she's like, I sit in these calls day after day with a global team and I'm bored by myself. I don't even feel like myself. I don't even like being with myself on a call. I'm sure these people don't like being with me either. And I was like, okay, I want you to like say one funny thing in your next meeting. And she had so much fun with it. So she goes to her next meeting, her virtual meeting. She says this funny thing. She gets all this feedback. Like people are laughing. They're commenting in the chat. People like brought up the funny moment later in the call. And now they had an inside joke around the funny thing that she said. That's a micro experiment. That's practicing doing something in a new way and then noticing the feedback, noticing what comes of that and being like, oh, that felt good. Like I tried this and the net result was increased participation, increased engagement, connection, laughter, advancing relationships, feeling energized after a meeting rather than feeling like I'm just really tired now because I'm bored by myself, bored by my own voice and the way that I've been doing things for 3 years. So those little micro experiments can be really helpful. The other thing that you can do is notice and then start to reframe patterns and habits. So notice when you're making a decision and you're like, oh, am I doing this because someone else does this and I'm not even thinking about it? I'm just like routinely doing it because this is the way other people have done it and not thinking about like, oh, how would I really want to do this? Am I saying something because I think it's what's expected to be said in a moment? Am I not saying something because I think it's expected that no one will speak up right now? So noticing patterns and habits and behaviors and then disrupting them and recognizing like, oh, I didn't used to do that, but now I'm going to. So really naming the thing, noticing like, oh, I used to do this and now I'm not. And now I'm doing this instead. And then that leads into that micro experiment, this new small behavior that I'm going to test out. Next is getting yourself in a larger pool of people like you. I've had so much fun hearing stories over the years of women, especially ages 40 plus, who decide to take up some sort of hobby, not because they want to be good at anything, not because they think they're going to be a superstar, but because they actually think they might be horrible at something, but they just want to try something new. And it's like the older you get, the lower the stakes often feel because you're like, I don't even care if I look foolish at this age. So I've had so many clients come to me and be like, okay, I decided to go join a women's hiking group. Or one of my good friends from high school started a women's knitting circle in her neighborhood when she moved to a new neighborhood. And she's like, oh, it's me and like a whole bunch of people who are like 30 years older than me, but we have so much fun. So getting around a larger pool of people who are like you in different ways, that doesn't mean that they're the same age or that there's the same demographic, but there's some sort of common shared interest. Getting into that larger pool of people where you can see like, oh, here's all these different versions of what it looks like to be this, the kind of a person who knits every Tuesday night, or the kind of a person who does weekend warrior mountain hiking every week, every Saturday. So looking at how can you get yourselves in larger pools in the workspace? How can you get yourself in circles of more women? Are there women's leadership events within your organization, or can you go to external events? So getting yourself in a larger pool of people so that, again, you can see that widened range of what is common and typical and how we can all show up leading in our secret sauce, honoring and owning our secret sauce. The next thing is to create more white space for yourself, time for less inputs. So this is literally noticing, when are you conscientiously building time into your day or your week or your month where you are not taking anything in? So this is something I've started doing in the shower. I used to like always have the radio or music on, and now it's nothing. And I'm telling you, oh my gosh, I get so many great ideas. I'll do this a lot of times when I'm driving places. So if I'm driving to pick my son up from a sports practice at night, instead of turning on a podcast, which I love to do because I love to be entertained and mindlessly entertained especially, but I'll just let myself sit and think about nothing. And I'll have really great insights and ideas into, oh, this thing happened today. And have I thought it through from this angle? And what does that mean? Or an insight into this thing that's coming up. Here's how I want to approach it from a really thoughtful and conscientious way. So just creating that white space for you to listen internally without an agenda goes a really long way to reconnecting to that inner voice that is so overwhelmed by constant inputs that you haven't probably listened to that inner voice in way too long. And then the final thing you can do to start showing more authenticity is to set new boundaries and then name them. Set and name the norms for you. So naming, I do this all the time when people say like, hey, do you want to join us for this thing next Wednesday night? And I'll say, oh, I would love to, but I can't because I'm already going to be gone 2 nights next week. And I don't leave my house more than 2 nights a week. So for me, like that's me being authentically me. It stresses me out so much if I have tons of nighttime events. So I'm like, nope, like that's my limit. Like people know this about me, right? Same thing with doing something that's late at night. I'm like, if I have to leave my house after 8 p.m. to go to something, like that's not the event for me. So noticing and naming boundaries. When someone asks you to send, this happens a lot when someone asks me to send over a proposal. So I'll be talking to some leaders in an organization who I maybe have just met in the last 15 minutes online. And we're talking about some work I might do for them. And they'll say like, we'd love to get a proposal as soon as possible. I could say, sure, I'll get that to you in 24 or 48 hours. Like I could hustle, right? I challenge myself, even though I really want to be impressive and please people, I challenge myself usually to say, I'll get that to you in 3 to 5 business days. Oftentimes I can do it sooner than that, but I want the norm to be that I don't immediately jump for people because there's plenty of times that I can't immediately jump for people. So why would I try to pretend that every time someone needs something from me, I'm going to stop everything else around me and do it? Instead, I'm going to say that my time is valuable and important and I'm really strategic with it. And therefore, I can get this to you in 5 to 7 business days. And in pretty much every case, they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. In fact, even a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, that's like very soon. I don't need it sooner than that. I'm always thinking like, oh, I should get it to them tomorrow, by end of day today. The reality is that people will generally be able to be flexible to the norms or the boundaries that you set. It's up to you to decide what those are. So practicing communicating what those are, and then practicing communicating your values by saying, hey, because I value honesty, I want to share with you blah, blah, blah. Because I value integrity, I think we should think about this angle of this issue. Because I value respect, I want to say this in a way that is intentional and isn't going to be harmful. So thinking through like, what are the things that you value? And then how do you label those and name them as norms for people to hear and see? Because that's how people start to understand who you are authentically. So when you think about how you want to show up as your most authentic self, what authenticity means to you, if you're a little like, I don't even know what that means for me, I promise you, you're not alone. And hopefully this episode is giving you some ideas in terms of what inauthentic behavior might look like for you, what the costs of inauthentic behavior might be for you, and then how can you start stepping into that authenticity, finding and connecting with that internal self, internal knowing in a way that allows you to shine in the ways that only you can shine, that allows you to step into your own voice and into your own persona and into your own strengths in the biggest way possible so that you get to benefit, but also that the rest of us get to benefit from the best version of you. You don't want to be a shell of yourself. And I promise you, none of us want you to be a shell of yourself. You don't like being around the shell of yourself version of you. But you know what? Not that we don't like being around this version of you, but we want to be around the version of you that is whole and complete and full and that provides us the full spectrum of who you really truly are. And that takes some time and intentionality, especially if you haven't been in a position to give it time and intentionality in the past. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that this gives you a few little action steps that you can take to start, again, trying those micro experiments to be more authentic and to step out of that authenticity trap. Because the trap is that we're told to be a certain way, but oftentimes the way that we're told to be, that's not really who we are. So we fall into the trap of being who other people want us to be, performing for others, and being self-sacrificial and self-abandoning over and over and over again. And I'm telling you, my friend, the costs are way too high to be doing that. So now you know the truth about the authenticity trap. You can do something about it starting today, and you can share this episode with other women in your life who you think might benefit from this kind of support and this kind of help. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that we can grow authentically together, and know that I love being here with you. I can't wait to be back next week. And until then, I'm in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit saradean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at saradean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at saradeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.